The normative narrative that we are considering is the idea that Canada and its citizens are free and equal. The idea is that because we have a democratic process and a relatively free market, society believes that every person has the right and ability to be successful if they work hard enough. We will be debunking this normative narrative through an analysis of how race, gender, ability, and religion affect socioeconomic status, utilizing the ideas of critical theory and the theory of intersectionality.
So according to our textbook titled, Is Everyone Really Equal? Racism refers to white racial and cultural prejudice and discrimination supported by institutional power and authority used to the advantage of whites and to the disadvantage of peoples of color. Prejudice is a learned judgment without sufficient investigation about members of social groups to which we don't belong. Prejudice is based on limited knowledge or experience with the group. Simplistic judgment and assumptions are made and projected onto everyone from that group. So the difference between racism and prejudice is that racism is something that whites can have towards people of color, but racism isn't something that people of color can have towards anyone. Because whites are the dominant people group, prejudice, however, is something that people of color can have towards white people or other people of color. Some examples of racism would be the fact that in schools, most schools, the story of Canada is still told as a white man's story. Another example would be in advertising. The default in advertising is still the white man or white woman. You can see that in promotions for educational faculties or advertising food. Like in the university, there are posters for Coca-Cola, and literally every person in every poster is white except for one who is slightly tanned. These are all examples of racism you can find around you. Okay. So one example of prejudice is if you look at in the Christian world, with churches, there are different types of churches. There's black churches, everyone knows about the black church, or the Asian church, the Filipino church, the Indian church. They won't say anything, but if someone white, or even if I were, as a black person, were to walk into a Filipino church, they would not necessarily say anything, but there would be a clear vibe that I am not supposed to be there and I am not welcome. Another, even playful example, playful from our end as colored people, is saying white people can't dance. That is definitely not true.
Sexism is defined in our textbook as a systematic oppression of women by men. It is based on the belief that men are inherently superior to women and encompass economic, political, social, and institutional actions and beliefs that show an unequal distribution of privileges, resources, and power between men and women. Oppression is harder for people to see now, and they often say that sexism doesn't exist because it's not as obvious. One of the reasons for this is because in places such as the East, women are treated far worse than they are here, so people take that as an excuse to say that sexism doesn't happen. Many of the examples that go along with sexism are associated with sexual assault. 1 in 4 women experience domestic violence, and 1 in 3 women will be a victim of rape.
Ableism, or disableism. The systematic oppression of people with perceived disabilities. Ableism is based on the assumption that there is a physical, intellectual, and emotional standard for human beings, and that this standard is the only one acceptable as normal. All other variations of the human body are considered abnormal, deviant, and inherently inferior. This norm is institutionalized in architectural structures, schools, policies, and practices, and legal segregation of persons with disabilities. Some activists prefer the term disableism because it centers the reason for the oppression, one's disability status. Okay, the textbook discusses how people who are able-bodied are at an advantage that we don't always realize. The world is built to accommodate able-bodied people because they are the dominant group in society. Able-bodied people are not always conscious of this because it has become the norm in society. And often because of this norm, society forgets about the struggles that people with disabilities face every day. People with disabilities struggle with many things such as finding jobs. Employers and society focus on their disabilities rather than their abilities. And these people are automatically at a disadvantage.
Intersectionality is a theory that explains how systems of power interlock to impact those that are most marginalized in society. All of the systems of power contribute to one's socioeconomic status, which is a measure of someone's economic and social position in relation to others based on income, education, and occupation. Many patterns of socioeconomic differences can be traced to the systems we described in this video. Western society runs on Judeo-Christian values and culture, thus those that do not fit these norms are marginalized. When a group holds institutional power, they control the ideology, political rules, and social rules for communication that are socialized for Westerners to see as normal. For those who subscribe to a different religion or culture, aspects of their religion and culture will be visible in their mannerisms, notions of modesty, communication skills, and customs. This will be seen as different or bad automatically by people of the dominant culture and will affect outcomes of hiring, socializing, and education. When culture and religion affect education and hiring, it will have a negative effect on socioeconomic status. Certain people will be more poor or more rich based on things that are not meritocracy.
In conclusion, Canada is said to be fair and equal, but as we've discussed, religion, racism, sexism, and ableism all play a big part in society. It puts people of the non-dominant groups at a disadvantage in everyday life.